Buenos dias and good afternoon. My name is Tony Milne and I serve on the Programme Committee for the IoT Solutions World Congress. I also work for Advantech. Advantech helped develop the third industrial revolution with its industrial computer, which drove PC-based automation and control. Today, with IoT, we are looking at the fourth industrial revolution. Are we ready? To pose this question, we're delighted to have someone with a distinguished career as a researcher and professor at Marquette and Chicago universities and the Harvard Business School. He has also worked as a consultant. Now at Deloitte, he heads their research into Industry 4.0. Please welcome Mr. Mark Cotteleer.
Thank you. Thanks, Tony. Appreciate it. Thank you. It's great to be here in Barcelona. I have to say, Tony walked into the ready room here before, and he looked at me and said, "You look just like Madonna." I don't know what that meant. I think it was the microphone, but so sorry, I'm not Madonna. And I am going to start this talk by do we have the slides?
They're showing here.
Where? Oh, we have them. Okay. So I'm gonna start the talk by poking just a little bit of fun at myself and at my colleagues in Deloitte Insights. Deloitte Insights is, many of you may not know, the research and publishing arm of Deloitte, which is, of course, one of the largest professional services firms in the world. And if you look at the cover slide here for this presentation, what you notice is that the metaphor that we've chosen is unambiguously a train. And I suppose that's appropriate because of the role that trains have played in past industrial revolutions. But the thing that concerned me on my flight on the way over here was I suddenly realized the perspective of the viewer of the train. And in this case, that person is standing on the tracks in front of it. And if we are thinking about readiness for the fourth industrial revolution, of course, we'd rather be the person that is on the train as opposed to watching it bear down on us. And so from that perspective, we're going to talk a little bit today about how do we get ready, how do we get on the train. Hopefully it hasn't left the station. As we think about this, we spend an enormous amount of time thinking about the impact of technologies, information and operations on our individual organizations. And that's probably appropriate. And it's one of the reasons that many of us are here. That at least is the perspective of Deloitte's global leadership. And so last year, so we need to think about it also in the context, though, of the social impact, the broader impacts of industrial revolutions, if we're in fact going to invoke that sort of metaphor, a fourth industrial revolution. At least that's the perspective of Deloitte's global leadership. And so last year and then again this year, our global chairman, Puneet Renjan, commissioned a cross-industry study of more than 1,600 C-level executives to help us understand what is happening with respect to this fourth industrial revolution. And we looked at that at four important levels: society, strategy, talent, and technology. Today, we've brought together a terrific panel of executives, clients, and partners that will help us understand those findings, react to those findings, and also offer their unique perspectives with respect to this phenomenon. Now, before I do that, though, I'd like to introduce a quick video. It's only 3 minutes long, and it will provide a brief overview of some of the key findings of that report. So let's see if this is going to play for us.
The fourth industrial revolution is here. Technologies like analytics and artificial intelligence are blurring the lines between our physical and digital worlds. This revolution is transforming industries, economies, and even society itself. But are business and government leaders prepared to harness the full potential of this era of Industry 4.0 in a way that benefits both industries and society? Deloitte joined forces with Forbes Insights to find out. We surveyed more than 1,600 C-level executives worldwide and uncovered several significant findings. First, 2 out of 3 executives surveyed say businesses will have a greater influence in shaping the future of society than governments and other groups like NGOs and not-for-profits. But that sentiment doesn't extend to themselves personally. Less than a quarter believe they, or their own organisation, have significant influence over social factors like education, sustainability and social mobility. Second, only 14% of executives surveyed are highly confident their organisation can effectively leverage the changes brought about by Industry 4.0. But this lack of confidence has not compelled executives to change their tactics. Many continue to focus on traditional, short-term business operations over longer-term strategies that create new value. Third, only a quarter of executives are highly confident they have the right workforce and skill sets needed for future success. But talent and HR continue to be low priorities within their organizations, even though 86% say they are doing everything they can to create a better prepared workforce. Finally, executives believe one of the biggest threats to their business over the next 5 years is new business models introduced by competitors. Therefore, it's understandable that one of the top considerations for companies when investing in advanced technologies is if they can support new business models to help them create, deliver, and capture value. There is little doubt Industry 4.0 will create exciting new opportunities. Those who take a broad view will be the ones to succeed in this new era. They will see connections between business and social needs, between financial outcomes and innovative strategies, between worker productivity and a changing workforce, and between improving operations and creating new value. The fourth industrial revolution has arrived. Are you ready? Learn more about how executives are navigating Industry 4.0 by visiting www.deloitte.com/insights/4IR.
Okay, so that represented a bit of an overview of what the findings themselves provide. In order to discuss that, we've got a terrific panel here. I'm going to start down at the end here. We have Mr. Scott Kelly. Scott is the COO and the Chief Transformation Officer for Hitachi Vantara, where he oversees the global daily operation of the company, and his responsibility is to keep the company's strategy aligned with its goal and essentially to watch out for the customer. So I've had the opportunity to work with Scott a bit over the last couple of years. I'll also say I think he's a pretty deep thinker, and we're delighted to have him on the panel with us. Another deep thinker we have K. Eric Harper. Eric is the Senior Principal Scientist for ABB, where among other things he examines the firm's strategy and response with respect to Industry 4.0. In addition, Eric is very involved in this conference. He's on the program committee for this year's conference and the Energy and Utilities track co-chair. He's also a member of the IIC steering committee as co-representative at large for industry members, the Technology Working Group co-chair, and the Industrial Analytics Group co-chair. So we're delighted to have you with us, Eric. And last, Dr. Joseph Vautel. Joseph leads the global partner ecosystem for industrial product solutions at Amazon Web Services, obviously a very important company in this space. Prior to AWS, he worked with Siemens, and so can share some of that perspective as well. He holds a PhD and an MBA from the Technical University of Munich, as well as a Master of Science in Computing Science from the University of Salzburg. So thank you all for being here. I mentioned at the top of my opening comments that the structure of the work that we've done in this space focuses at 4 levels: society, strategy, talent, technology. And I'd like to begin at that high level, society, and then work our way down, if you don't mind. And so I'll start with a question to each of you. Maybe we can start with you, Eric, and just work down the line. At the society level, the executives that we survey are overwhelmingly positive about the impact that Industry 4.0 that they see is going to have on issues related to society, inequality, stability. In fact, CXOs overwhelmingly, and 87% believe or reported that they believe that Industry 4.0 will lead to more equality and stability. 3/4 say that business will have more influence than organizations like governments and others in shaping this future. But interestingly, at least to me, fewer than 25% believe that their own organizations hold much influence on such critical factors as education, stability, and social mobility. I'm wondering if you could give us your reaction to that. Are you optimistic? And what is the role do you think that the individual plays as opposed to the broader business in shaping the impacts that we're going to have here?
Well, thank you, Mark. And it's an excellent study that you've done, you and your team have done. And when we think about the history of humanity, from the beginning, when someone decided to put a couple smooth logs underneath a rock to move it easier, so automation is something that will continue. It's part of our DNA. And so as we think about the industrial Internet of Things and this next step, the industrial revolution now at its fourth stage, I'm very positive. So you worry, how is this going to affect our society? And if you look at the United States, there was a time when the majority of the population were involved in agriculture. And today it's only 4%. And yet society has not collapsed. Now granted, someone who wants to go out in the field and dig a hole, we have machines to do that now. So it raises the quality of life, and it also raises society to higher levels. So I do believe that we have many challenges ahead of us, but the future is bright.
Joseph?
Thank you very much. Actually, I absolutely share your view on a positive outline of the challenges ahead of us. What I see from a technology platform provider side, we see a lot of new opportunities arising for companies, either to transform itself, but also to do totally different things. When we work with partners, but also with customers, we see a lot of companies that have produced physical assets now really getting technology companies, ramping up new IT skills, new data analytics skills, getting into selling digital services, which will help them to sustain in the future compete on a global level. This is also, maybe to add to this, a huge opportunity for areas that are not really centralized. Because if you sell a digital service, you put it on a digital infrastructure, you can do it from everywhere around the world. We do have a big shift in certain areas of the world between the well-educated urban population and we have the landscape on the countryside. This is a huge step ahead for this. And finally, ultimately the products. When we look at the Industrial Revolution, we look at product design, and production. Currently, the products that we use are mainly built how to produce them optimally with new technology, with new analytics capabilities, but also new production technologies like adaptive design. We can produce better products for everyone, better accessible, cheaper, better suited to the task, but also more economically friendly for the use and benefit of everyone.
Thank you. And Mark, yes, I would say also I'm extremely positive about what the future can hold. I think particularly with the application of different technologies. I think what we're seeing is very much an exploration of the art of the possible. I think even my own company, Hitachi, our credo going back over a century is that of contributing to society through superior products and technologies. And I think that's something that we've lived as an organization for the last 100 or so years, 110 years. So I'm very positive about our ability as organizations to contribute more through technology and solutions that we develop. I think there's also risks involved though, and I think in some respects, what the study states that you referenced, there was more equality and stability. Arguably, I would say that one could solve more of those challenges without the need for technology. So I think, it's really more than, and I think a lot of what the study shows, is it's more than just the technology and the solutions. It has to be about the applications of people and creating a much more collaborative environment and society at large. So I think what we need to focus on is the bifurcation of both technologies and how we work together within ecosystems, which in many respects is not how organizations have been set up. Really, we have terms like competition and war rooms, and really the goal was to annihilate the competition.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't to collaborate, it wasn't to partner, and it certainly wasn't to operate as part of an ecosystem. Now, there's absolutely no way any organization can be successful without those factors. So I think there's a higher level societal goal that I think the study talked to. And it's interesting, I think your comment was, nobody really sees it as their responsibility.
Yeah.
It's like, someone's going to fix this. It's just not going to be us. You know, so I think we all have to change our mindsets as organizations and as partners in order to really address some of those more lofty societal goals that have been set.
Terrific, thanks. Joseph, I'm going to come back to you and then go to Eric at the strategy level of this question. Setting strategy is about making choices about what we will and we won't focus on. Consistently in our research, in this research, and in fact in a study that we just published this past week, organizations seem to focus more narrowly than that. So in the study that we just published, respondents, senior executives, claimed that they focused on operational goals as a driver of transformation by a factor of 2 to 1 over drivers like increased desire for innovation. It almost seems in the data like there's a bit of a defensive crouch here. Can you sort of react to that data and talk about what you think might explain that and how we might find our way out?
Absolutely. So first of all, we are a technology provider. We provide cloud computing and we provide higher level services like services for machine learning, for IoT and so on. Like Lego blocks where you can build products and application on top of it. And when we work with companies and with senior deciders, we see very much that more and more they really focus on their core strength. So just as an example, when we talk with product owners, can be for internal company use, but can also be for external sales of a digital service. They also look, I have 100 guys on my book. How many of those really generate value for my end customer, for my business unit? And we help them really to evaluate which technology they can use to really maximize that output of the developers and leave away the heavy lifting and shifting of a technology stack that is more and more standard, where they cannot really differentiate from competition. What we also see is that technology in business is inherently linked. So if you make a technology or architectural choice of your IoT system, of your analytics system, you might lose some opportunities for additional business or additional innovation on the low end. We very much promote a very flexible system. We call it a microservice-based architecture. With that, you have the ability to use the strength of underlying technology, but you do not limit yourself to a monolithic approach or to excluding possible future technology in future applications that no one currently can foresee. Or maybe, referring to what you said, you need to take on because you need to partner in a specific account, with specific customer engagement with a company you've never planned for. Yeah. This is what I can say of our daily work with customers and technology vendors using our technology and having to make strategic decisions based on strategy.
So you're looking for you're creating options through a flexible technology stack and then looking
and
for
really
partners
focus on what is the secret sauce of the company, where can only the company add additional functionality and not really reinventing the wheel over time. Because it is super ineffective and costly, and you lose speed to optimize your production, for example, if you do things over where someone else can do the heavy lifting and shifting for everyone and you just take advantage of that. This is what we see.
Eric, what would your perspective be on this sort of operational focus versus innovative focus?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So I actually want to take it a step further than you did, Joseph. What we see is that even with the same company, within the same company, you need to have a sense of urgency. And saying just in general, we want to do innovation, no one's ever going to fund that. Maybe you have some visionary senior stakeholder who might, but typically what we find, as you said, you need to focus on the use case, you need to focus on the value proposition, but even because you mentioned data, Mark, and this is really what's new in industry, right? So previously, the intelligence, and still is, based on someone who has immersed themselves in a particular problem for a really long time, and they hear a sound and they say, oh, something's wrong, we got to fix that, right? And then someone, was writing things down on a clipboard, right? Or maybe they looked at a sensor and wrote a number down, and then you had a little bit more historical record. But now the data is really key. And just saying, I want to innovate, give me all your data, even within a single company doesn't work. You have to have a very specific, critical concern, a problem, and it's tied back to a customer who's saying, well, do we stay with you or do we go find somebody else? And so when you focus on those specific concerns, sharing of data, sharing of subject matter expertise just happens seamlessly because everyone's focused on solving those problems. So I think that's the reason why it's focused on operational rather than innovation. Yeah.
And you think that's appropriate, or do we need to shift the focus?
So if I could continue?
Please, just a minute.
So what you want to do is look at those point solutions and then see what's in common across them. And in my role in corporate research in ABB, I get to sit in the catbird seat and see all the problems and solutions and then look for that harmonization.
Terrific. You invoked talent just a little bit. Scott, I want to come back to you with a talent question. I happen to know that you, in your past career, played a pretty significant HR role at Hitachi Vantara. So in the data, only a quarter of the C-level executives that we surveyed are highly confident that they have the right workforce composition and skill set needed for the future, despite 86%, and a pretty high percentage, saying that they're doing everything they can to create a workforce for Industry 4.0. So I wonder if you put your HR hat, put your talent hat on for me and talk a little bit about what your reaction is to that and what Hitachi Vantara is doing, how you're approaching the talent question from that perspective, given your current role.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mark. I think this is one of those very interesting paradoxes, I think, from the research and the data that you've just mentioned. First of all, I think my initial thought was I was relatively surprised that the number was as high as 25%. I think the 80-something number did not surprise me at all. And I think really what this talks to is a lack of awareness, I would say, across organizations about the role that talent actually plays. The question when I operated as a CHRO is typically I would see, the CEO believes talent is one of the number one critical factors. And my answer would always be, so how much more did the CEO spend on talent initiatives year on year? Because it's still a number one initiative. And the reason is because there isn't the right amount of investment. I actually believe it's such a critical component to accelerate digital transformation for organizations. And indeed, I also operate as the Chief Transformation Officer, and one of the terms we use is the acceleration of the transformation is directly proportional to the talent that we employ to drive it forward. So I think some of the things that we've done is really, some of it's simple, some of it's a little bit more sophisticated. We've done the usual things, which is improve platforms, improve access, look to develop technologies and solutions where we can understand engagement and use some evidence and data around engagement of employees and look to see how we can improve that. We've also, more importantly, I think, aligned the organization, spent a huge amount of time on the change in communication processes that really engage the organization around the transformation, the requirements for the transformation, and actually at a fundamental and individual level, the role that each person plays. I don't think we're there yet with that. We still have a lot more work to do. And it's literally an ongoing minute-by-minute exercise. As soon as you turn your attention away from that, folks will, it's the elastic band analogy, it'll just ping back to where your culture was before and what everyone did on a day-to-day basis. So I think, I often think that people at C-level don't really fully understand, frankly, the importance of the role in talent. If they did, they would spend money differently in their organization. But I think it is one of the major decelerators, to say nothing of how competitive the environment is. And maybe the final thing I'd say, Mark, is it's not just about data scientists and data engineers. You know, you need to take a holistic look at the entire enterprise when you look at talent. So you need different finance people, you need different people in HR with different skills. You know, you can't just bring everyone in from the outside, you have to augment, and that means developing the critical resources you have internal to your organization, because they're essentially your DNA. So in any organization that's trying to transform, what you do for the people you already have, both in terms of retaining them and developing them to be ready for their digital futures, as well as the absolute necessary augmentation of external skills, is what helps organizations drive forward.
Terrific. Joseph or Eric, any specific ads that you'd like to make or
Maybe as general, what we see as a technology provider working with companies. You mentioned data scientists. The question is, how do I get, I need to move, I need to change, I need to embrace the digital transformation. Then where do I get talent? First of all, a lot of industrial corporations are not in the city centers. They have the R&D centers not in the city centers. Sometimes these are SMBs. It's very hard for them to hire. Some are more successful, some others. One strategy we see is build a digital hub in cities like San Francisco or Bay Area or Berlin and whatever. But what happens then, you get people in, but it's very hard to combine this analytics knowledge with the process knowledge that still sits in your business unit. And ultimately, this is what we see makes projects successful. If you have people or teams that understand the process, the technology behind it, and the analytics. Successful projects, first of all, have these teams somehow combined. But what we also see, and I think I want to directly pick up what you said, is enable your existing staff base. And I think there is a play for technology vendors like ours. Just look at data science. In former times, a data scientist needed to be an expert in R, needed to build up an ETL a pipeline to cleanse the data and so on. 80% of the work he did anyhow was data cleansing and remove false positives and so on. And what we can do is we provide tools to make it easier for, I would say, engineers, process experts to do this. And as a concrete example, we work with a partner for a company called Hamlet. They make industrial valves based in Israel. And we did a project with their engineers and our partner in 8 weeks to do machine learning based on sound of the valve, train a model, in our product is IoT Analytics, push the model down and do the inference in real time on the gateway close to the valve. I think this is where it goes. Look at where new technology can help, and then embrace your own staff base, your process experts, to really work on this technology. You'd be surprised how motivated people, long-standing employees are, being allowed and being engaged and motivated to work with this new technology. We see great results, one I just mentioned, with our partners and customers we work with.
Terrific. Eric, I'm going to come back to you with a technology question. Just 14% of respondents in the report that we published are highly confident that their organizations are ready to fully harness the changes associated with Industry 4.0. I happen to know you and I talked over the last several weeks. This is a topic on which you've specifically done some research, and so I'm wondering if you could share, I know you've brought a slide, if you could share with us just a little bit of what your findings were in this space.
Yeah, so this idea of the impact on society of the fourth industrial revolution is on the minds of very senior stakeholders around the globe. So if you think about the World Economic Forum, this has been discussed. So here? Press
the green button.
Hey, okay, nice. And so they are thinking at the policy level. You know, we talk a lot about maturity of processes, but in this case, it's not really the maturity of the society because, you know, everyone has their own cycles. It's really, as the title of this session is about readiness. So there was a study that was done by The Economist, sponsored by ABB, around automation readiness, really responding to these concerns in the World Economic Forum. And what they did is, in this study, they came up, and also similar to your study, Mark, to where a lot of people were interviewed, is they came up with 3 pillars. One is the innovation environment. The second is the labor market policy, so that speaks to what you were talking about, Scott, and then the education policies, so if people want to transform the cultures in their company, they have to be ready to help their citizens. And so from a technology perspective and that innovation environment, we can now have perhaps the next level of detail, which we're framing as digitalization readiness. And there are really 3 perspectives. One is, am I ready with my data? Second, is the intelligence or the analytics or the AI that I'm using, is that at the right level? And then third, as you asked, is the organization ready? And if you look at the 3 of these, now you can see that there are dimensions of each one of these perspectives. So for example, with data readiness, have I collected history of data? Because I would need that to train artificial intelligent models. Do I have provenance? Do I keep track of where the data came from, and so I can always trace back when I find some kind of solution? For the intelligence, there is a similar set of dimensions. One is, what is the rationale? This is a key question everyone has, and the reason why 3 decades ago, why we used expert system rather than neural net, because you couldn't explain why a neural net was giving you a specific recommendation. And certainly, what are the analytics algorithms that you're using? For organizational readiness, there's a lot more dimensions. So for example, do I have senior leadership who is engaged and promoting? Do I have collaboration across my business units? Is the solutions we're putting in place, do they ensure the protection of people and property, that they're not damaged? So this is really just the beginnings, but this idea of readiness, I think we all need to engage and develop it further.
So you've got, I mean, this looks to me like a little bit of a maturity model almost, to say where, can we locate ourselves on this kind of a map?
Yeah, so the reason why we don't use maturity is because you may decide to be at a low level of maturity in a particular dimension because it's cost effective or you don't need it. So maturity, always we think children to adults. We always are growing, right? And it's better to think about it as readiness.
Terrific, terrific. So you're making choices about where you want to locate on the map based on the context in which you find yourself.
Yeah.
Terrific, terrific, terrific. Joseph, I'm going to come back to you, and you touched on this a little bit, again, related to technology earlier in your comments, but I wanted to see if I can get you to unpack it just a little bit. When we were talking in the weeks leading up to this, you said something to me that I thought was very powerful and seemed very important to you. You said, customers want end-to-end solutions in the cloud and seek strategic advice to master their transformation. Partners active in the space need to prove to deliver beyond proofs of concept on a global scale. You've alluded to that a little bit in your earlier comments, but I'm wondering if you can unpack that a little and give us some specific examples of what you mean about moving beyond proof of concept and into actual solutions.
So, first of all, when we look at the industrial space, as I alluded, we look at the full circle. Design, any product needs to be designed, any production needs to be designed, and then the production where you come up from in industrial automation up to what's now called industrial IoT applications, MES applications, to very specific business systems like an asset management system. This is what we think of the scope. And when people and companies think of transformation, they think of the whole thing. Yeah? It's not so much really, it's changing one single thing. And why do we see this, or the feedback that we get is, for sure an MES system, an IoT system, 3D design application will get better and better and better. But ultimately, customers see the value in the integration. And once you integrate different products, you need to have them on one data platform. This is what our company can provide. Therefore, we work with partners to have applications, have a strong community of applications on our platform so that big corporations can come to us and can really have all the applications on our technology. And then generate feedback loops. And there is two different feedback loops. There's the feedback loop in production, where you say, okay, this conveyor belt is maybe too fast, I make it a bit slower, and then by that I ultimately introduce throughput. But then, and this is why we're having this industrial software scope, you also can get a feedback loop from the product in operation back to the design process. We have a specific example out there. We partnered with Dassault Systems, where we have an example of a small product, a speaker, that is produced, just like the Alexa speaker, and then in operation in different conditions around the globe, you see how the battery behaves, and this can be totally different. This can give very valuable input to the designer of the next version of that speaker, how to optimize the battery system for different markets on the globe. And this is what we mean with a real global span. The other thing is, as soon as you have this, you need a global span of your infrastructure and of your data. Data will be global. The designer might sit in Mumbai, the factory might be in South America, but you need the data on one place. And therefore, you need mechanisms such as the cloud to really consolidate the data to make better decisions for ultimately better and cheaper products.
Scott, what's your perspective on this issue?
So I think I'd say a couple of things there. First of all, I think Joseph's exactly right with respect to the integration requirements from customers. I think the POC hell that I think everyone has lived through over the last few years, I think is thankfully coming to an end. I once heard it described, and I think it's correct, is probably the best free engineering experiment the world has ever seen. So I think what organizations, including our own, have done a much better job of is started to be very strategy-led and very specific around what the POCs are and how they translate into POVs. And I also agree in terms of the global scaling of that. It needs to be about an industrialization of taking that, first of all, the identification of the POCs, moving quickly to POVs, and the industrialization of that entire process on a global scale. I think the integration point speaks to itself with respect to the value that customers can gain. I think there is this other point that Joseph has made around what customers are looking for, and I think as we go through our own digital transformation with Hitachi Vantara, which is really about bringing this incredible assetry that we have, almost $80 billion worth of operational technology and 100 years experience with a $20 billion IT global entity together. We're one of those very few organizations that have that ability. And as Hitachi Vantara, which was formed to basically create that digital component for Hitachi, as we go through our digital transformation, we can educate and guide customers along that same journey path. I think that the point where I would disagree is I don't think there's ever consumption that is uniform. So I think the consumption is not always going to be cloud-based. I think there's an on-prem application component that is going to stay that way. Some of it's going to be customer preference. Some of it's going to be driven by trust and security and latency and all of those challenges. So I think we need to be ready, and we talk a lot about flexibility and consumption. We talk a lot about composability within the stack itself. So I think you as an organization, that word flexibility and adaptability around customer needs and where they see value is vitally important for any organization.
Terrific. And Eric, coming back to you on you talked a little bit about solutions. Big consumer and producer ABB of industrial products. In fact, we've got ABB robots on the stage with us. What sorts of solutions are you guys thinking about in this space? What looks like a good solution to you?
Thanks, Mark. So what we're thinking about solutions is how can the automation, how can the artificial intelligence complement the workforce? And in every case, you see an opportunity where all the complexity of a particular problem can't fit in one person's head. And that's where the data science comes to manage that complexity. And yet on the flip side, if I'm using data science, I have a ton of data. If I don't have subject matter experts to be able to guide that in a productive way and to validate the results, then I also can't create the value. So it's really a marriage, a partnership of the subject matter expertise with the data science.
Terrific. Okay, we've just got about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to do the lightning round. It's always important to me that you know, we have next steps, right? So I'm going to challenge each of you to just take a minute or two. Maybe we'll start again with you, Eric, and go right down the line. Give the audience a couple of next steps specific that you or your company would recommend folks consider as we leave Barcelona in the next couple of days and march out into this new world, so that we're ready. What's your?
Well, I think it's time for divergent thinking still. And so you saw this idea of digitalization readiness. Maybe those dimensions are not necessarily what you would use. So go and think about, for each of those three perspectives, data, intelligence, and organization, what is important to you, and then let's get back together and discuss where we can kind of combine our thoughts to make something that everyone can use.
Terrific. Joseph?
Good. Maybe just what we've seen, what really worked out. First of all, work backwards from the customer, find a finite problem, and really isolate it and seek a solution for it. The other thing is decide on a technology stack and then build up the muscle yourself. Independent, if you're a customer, if you build physical things, if you are entering into a digital service business, you need to master technology. The third thing is try it out, move fast, yeah, and especially get over this POC hell, yeah, really work with a concrete problem, generate a product out, and then iterate fast. And the last thing is, and I very much like your comment before, you're not alone out there. Seek the ecosystem of your technology provider, of other partners, to market it, to get to a first customer base, because ultimately this will be the secret sauce to improving your offering, and you get into this virtuous cycle where you can have an exponential growing service business.
Excellent. And then, yes, Mark, what I would say is, look, this isn't going away. I talk about the adoption curves around IoT. I think we feel that we've maybe had a few false starts, but I think, you know, this is going to transform the world as we know it. And I think it's like, be part of that. Understand that's going to have an enterprise impact. This is not like a functional go-to-market or departmental thing. You need to get your organization geared towards the challenging future that we're going to face. And I mean that quite directly because I think a lot of organizations will not make this transition. And I think it's really important that your organization, or the one that you decide to work for, decides that this is an enterprise problem to solve. You know, a couple of other things I would maybe touch on is, you know, talent is an enterprise issue. It's too big a problem to leave to your HR function. It's an enterprise challenge that needs to be affected. I think, as Joseph mentioned, recognize that you need to be a functioning part of the ecosystem, but you also need to be seen as a trusted partner within that ecosystem. So that brand that you have working as a partner is going to be vitally important going forward. And I think, you know, experiment, take risks. A lot of what we see with the lack of focus on innovation, where actually the ROI is as successful as the focus on operational execution, is just a lack of risk-taking, which I think has become pervasive over the last 10 years. And I think what we need to really expand beyond is taking risks and actually rewarding, changing the organizational construct to reward something that doesn't give immediate return. I think they would be some of the folks.
Scott, you said, I want to go back to something you said, so thank you. I want to go back to something you said, and I'm happy for everyone, we're very short on time, but I'm happy for everyone to react. You said some organizations will not make the transition. So I'm going to go back to my train metaphor. Do you believe that this is a situation of being on the train or in front of it? Or do we have the luxury of bystanding and letting this thing roll out for a little?
100%. The only question is over what time frame, you know, but 100%, I think it's going to be the haves and have-nots. We're already seeing that across many organizations right now, but absolutely.
Okay, I want to give you guys a shot. You want to, on the train or in front of it?
Absolutely, I think there will be, you can also call it a shake-up. What I want to add is, but the barrier to give it a try has never been lower, and it's constantly get lower. So yes, there is risk-taking, but take a risk. It will not cost you as much as it has costed you 3 years ago to give it a try with a digital business, because of all the technology and partly also of the cloud, bringing that to you, and you can start small, see if it lands, and if not, give it another try with another idea for a specific problem around a digital service in your customer base.
So, you know, industries are regularly disrupted, and if you're on the receiving end of that, it's not necessarily a good thing, but you could frame it as, I need some kind of external sense of urgency. And so if you see that in your backyard where you think that you have an advantage and you're losing it, it really can motivate everyone in your organization to get going and think creatively.
Okay, terrific. Last question. You invoked your research a minute ago. I've got a slide up here that shows where people can go for Deloitte's work. It's all free and accessible. Will your work be published?
Yes,
Is there a
sure.
plan to publish
Yes.
it?
Yeah.
And when is it? You want to give a quick? We don't have it on a slide.
No, I don't. There's no time frame. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Terrific. All right. Well, then I want to. We're out of time. I want to thank you, Hitachi, Vantara, AWS, ABB. Thank you, all you guys. Thank you for being here and for sharing your perspective. And thank you to the audience for taking the time to be with us today. We certainly hope that it was useful. Thank you. Enjoy Barcelona.
Great. Nice job, Mark. Thank you.